be speaking to the city of Cleveland as if to say, don't blame me for this one. That is the man that gave Deshaun Watson guaranteed $230 million, which right now is going down as arguably the worst.
Well, I think that's really more of an Andrew question, okay? But I think, what was that pick, 146? We thought he was good value at 146.
That's so much of what happened to Shedeur Sanders at draft day to drop to the 144th pick, a fifth rounder, when initially he was projected to be a top 2 or 3 quarterback taken in the draft. For all of that to happen to him, that was a slight, those were people that were hell-bent on making sure that Deion Sanders didn't get his way. And they went and they punished his son to punish him.
Today, Stephen A. Smith didn't hold back, furiously criticizing Jimmy Haslam, the owner of the Cleveland Browns, for his remarks against Shedeur Sanders. He referred to him as a coward and made it apparent that Haslam's attempt to place the blame elsewhere was merely a feeble attempt to hide his errors. It got worse, according to Stephen, who said that Haslam was attempting to hide the fact that he didn't draft Shedeur. Not by any means was Stephen finished. He continued by saying something that rocked the sports world. Stephen claims that Jimmy Haslam was one of the main players who ensured Shedeur Sanders lost in the 5th round. And he had a reason for doing it. The draft wasn't the only issue. It had to do with communicating with Deion Sanders. Additionally, they caused Deion pain by.
And that had a lot to do with it. It was personal, and it wasn't some collusion that was going on. They didn't have to, because universally they felt, they watched the interviews, they saw the way Deion Sanders was speaking or whatever, and that's what broke his heart. I'm telling you what I know. It broke his heart because he knew there's no way that his son was going to fall to a 5th round.
Stephen A. Smith called out the carefully crafted story that had been circulated about Shedeur Sanders and broke down the entire issue without holding back. He emphasized how the media put in a lot of effort to skew the story about Shedeur's performances, interviews, and persona in order to put him in a situation where he would be passed over for the selection. Stephen clarified that this was no unintentional error. It has nothing to do with football. It was intimate. The intention was to communicate with Deion Sanders. And the plan was straightforward. Harm Deion by going after his son, a talented player. Like Shedeur Sanders fell all the way to the 5th round for no apparent reason other than that some league officials were determined to see that he did. After Jimmy Haslam said he didn't consider signing Shedeur Sanders while driving back, Stephen A. Smith didn't let him off the hook. Stephen made it quite evident that this wasn't a haphazard remark. It was a component of a larger scheme to prevent Shedeur from receiving the chance he was due. Haslam and others weren't merely playing the draft game, according to Stephen. They made a concerted effort to prevent Shedeur from being signed. You were not going to let it happen, Stephen said to everyone. He wasn't mistaken, either. The Browns' owner's remarks merely served to highlight the fundamental reality that some people were not interested in giving Shedeur Sanders a fair chance. Football wasn't the only topic of discussion. It has to do with influence, control, and power dynamics.
Understand what's going on here. That's why Haslam was in his car on a Friday talking about, I can't see it happening, because they weren't going to let it happen.
Mad Dog was quick to jump to Jimmy Haslam's defense, throwing cold water on the entire debate. He dismissed the notion that Shedeur Sanders' draft position even mattered, claiming that no one in the league cared whether he was picked in the 1st or 5th round. Mad Dog made his point clear. Shedeur Sanders is going to have the chance to prove himself no matter when or where he was selected. To back it up, he pointed to the careers of Tom Brady and Joe Montana, both Hall of Famers who were drafted far lower than expected, yet went on to become legends in the NFL. For Mad Dog, the message was simple. It doesn't matter when you're drafted. It's about what you do with the opportunity once you're on the field. He argued there was no lobbying against Shedeur Sanders from NFL teams. And if he earned the starting job, then he'd get it, regardless of where he was picked.
Who cares what round he's drafted in now? Unitas was cut went to the Colts, best quarterback
Not
ever.
now.
Brady was a 5th or a 6th round pick. Who cares? He's one of the greatest quarterbacks. Montana wasn't a 1st round pick. Shedeur Sanders right now has ample opportunity on a team that has no quarterback, that has a great history, that needs a quarterback in the worst way. And if he's good, and if he earns the job, he's going to get the job.
Louis Riddick wasn't having any of it. He cut Mad Dog off right there, making it clear that Shedeur Sanders was not being given the opportunity he deserved, and he wasn't about to let the narrative slip by unnoticed. Riddick outright rejected the claim that Shedeur was getting an equal shot, calling it for what it was, a blatant misrepresentation of the situation. He pointed out a key detail that Mad Dog had overlooked. Shedeur Sanders didn't even let his father come to training camp because of how poorly he was being treated, getting just 4 reps a day. Louis flat out asked, "Is that fair?" Louis Riddick wasn't done yet. He went all-in against Mad Dog's claim, pointing out that while Shedeur Sanders would get the chance to play in the preseason, the real issue was the lack of reps he was getting with the team.
We're going to play get. Now, that doesn't mean he's not going to play in the preseason. He is, but he's not getting the reps in practice. So what really is happening is he's going to have to be like spectacular in the preseason games, okay? Because he's not getting the reps right now to practice the things he's going to do in the preseason game.
Louis Riddick wasn't pulling any punches, making it clear that players drafted this low like Shedeur Sanders typically don't make it to the first team, unless they have someone advocating for them, someone willing to fight for their opportunity. Riddick's frustration boiled over when he pointed out that it's still unclear who was even responsible for bringing Shedeur's name up for signing in the first place. That uncertainty in his eyes put Shedeur at an even greater disadvantage. He also laid down a harsh reality about the NFL system. There's no pure meritocracy. Riddick admitted he'd seen players who were clearly better than others get completely ignored by coaches, simply because the coaches didn't want them or didn't have a personal connection.
Only advocating for you. Don't tell me that the NFL is just a meritocracy and the best players play. BS. It's not the case. Okay, I've seen players, I've been in personnel meetings where people are getting killed who coaches just don't want. And they may be better than the people who are playing ahead of them. I've seen it happen.
Without holding back, Stephen A. Smith delved deeply into the situation's painful reality. He clarified that Shedeur Sanders' ordeal involved more than just football. It has to do with something far more significant. He drew attention to the obvious double standard in the way players are handled according to their race. Stephen emphasized that players who had previously refused to join the NFL, or who were not subjected to the same examination, such as Eli Manning, were exempt. However, it had become an unthinkable problem for Shedeur. Even though he spoke directly to Mad Dog, Stephen A. Smith refused to back down, stating unequivocally that although Doggy had the right to his own interpretation and analysis, there was a more profound fact that could not be disregarded. Yes, Mad Dog could view this from an analytical perspective, but that didn't change the fact that Shedeur Sanders was wronged, and no amount of analysis could whitewash that truth, he said. Stephen's involvement extended beyond football. He emphasized that, as black men, they were entitled to see things from their own perspective, one that was influenced by their personal histories and the ways in which black athletes were treated in the NFL. Int 907, it doesn't make you wrong. Dog, to know that his father and the hostility he attracts from his detractors helped bring about that for him. All I'm saying is that I have the right to see it my way, and you have the right to see it your way. Ultimately, Mad Dog, Louis Riddick, and Stephen A. Smith all presented their arguments, each with a unique viewpoint on Shedeur Sanders' path and the challenges he has encountered. However, this entire discussion exposed something much more important than football. It concerns the indisputable intersections between opportunity, power, and race. The truth is the same regardless of whether you consider it to be a question of politics, merit, or systematic injustice. Someone has wronged Shedeur Sanders. Additionally, the story of his draft experience highlights a more serious problem in the NFL. Fundamentally, Stephen A. stated that this is about more than just Shedeur. Sanders' ability or potential. This relates to how black athletes, particularly black quarterbacks, are perceived and handled differently than other athletes. Those that experience this firsthand perceive the wider picture, whereas commentators like Mad Dog would concentrate on the game specifics. And that image depicts bias, injustice, and an uneven playing field. Shedeur's path ahead will surely be difficult, but as Louis Riddick noted, there's no denying his brilliance. However, as Stephen A. correctly noted, the struggle for equality, justice, and respect is far from over. It remains to be seen if the NFL, its coaches, and its owners will eventually accept this fact and provide Shedeur and others like him with the equal opportunity they so richly deserve. The argument will continue until then. However, one thing is evident to those who perceive the truth. The system must alter, and it must do so immediately. But what do you think? Does Shedeur Sanders' MFL draft experience represent the league's broader problems, or are missed opportunities and bad luck the only causes? Do you think that black quarterbacks' treatment differs from that of their white counterparts because of their race? Or is this just another illustration of a system that has flaws and where the sole important factor should be performance? Tell us what you think, because there is more than one participant at the center of this discussion. It concerns a far more significant issue that requires attention.